Welcome to another episode of Got Time with Christopher John, your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Before we get into it, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Paul Laurence Dunbar, one of our most important poets, was born in Dayton, Ohio. His father was a freedom seeker who escaped slavery, who went on to serve in the Union Army during the War of the Rebellion against the Confederacy. His mother was a laundress, washing, ironing, and cleaning clothes and linens. By the age of 6, Dunbar was writing and reciting poetry. In high school, he excelled as a member of the Debating Society, president of the Literary Society, and editor of the school's newspaper. Dunbar authored several novels, books, librettos, songs, essays, and short stories, and 6 volumes of poetry. His most famous recitals took place at the 1893 World Columbia Exposition in Chicago and in England. In addition to the pressures of being black in America and an overwhelming belief that he was a failed poet, alcoholism and a bout with tuberculosis claimed his life in 1906. His most renowned poem, We Wear the Mask, speaks volumes about the weight of racial trauma on the human spirit. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but, O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh, the clay is vile beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the world dream otherwise. We wear the mask. Joining me at the table is a brilliant scholar who is the youngest African-American female to be tenured at an institution of higher learning in U.S. history. Also, we have a legend at the table, right? She served as a professor of general psychology, social psychology, black psychology, and black studies at her previous institution before making the pivot into to what she is doing now. She is an inspirational speaker, a holistic self-care consultant, a doula, minister, author, activist, and advocate, Taylor Curtis.
Hello.
Oh my goodness, Taylor, it's so good to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I thank you for just taking the time, because I understand that you are busy, and we're going to get into, what some would perceive to be a deep topic, unmasking, racial trauma. But we also want to give people the tools as well, as we try to navigate through everything. Now, when we had the conversation, I've had several conversations with you, and you mentioned Dr. Joy Angela DeGruy, yeah.
Yes.
And I saw that she just was appointed provost, a distinguished visiting scholar at Morehouse University.
Yes. Isn't that amazing? Bravo to her.
It is, absolutely. And so I know that she has inspired you in a lot of the work you're doing. So could you introduce her and the impact that she made to
Absolutely. On this journey to liberation work that I'm on, that I have been in, I got to a point where I recognized that racial justice and racism was a much deeper topic than what folks were talking about. When I was in my master's degree program, I believe was when I had started to really study and research the impact of racial microaggression on higher education. And in that time, I was recognizing these trends of the impact of racism on a different level than just the systemic level and the systemic impact, but on the mental health level. And so as I began to dig deeper into what that impact looked like, I started exploring Black psychology more and started exploring how to excavate that information and share it with my students. And in the process of teaching a Black psychology class, as I was doing more research to build the curriculum, I came across Dr. Joy DeGruy, and she came out with this book that a lot of people are now well aware of, but is banned in a lot of areas as well, called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome. And she really pulled me in with that because as a psychologist, I'm very familiar with post-traumatic stress disorder and very familiar that as an anxiety disorder, when someone encounters some level of trauma, whether that is through natural disaster, your neighborhood experienced a hurricane, or whether that's through, military action that you were on a war field, or whether that is through a car accident or abusive experiences in the home, or, all of these other things, we were very aware that there's trauma, there's something that happens that creates this internal response that is mentally there and biologically there. And then it interprets through your behavioral responses, right? And so I was aware of this, and that, people who had significant trauma experiences might have stress that goes along with that, triggers that go along with that, and reactions that go along with that, that is a result of that traumatic experience. And when I started looking at racial trauma and studying into racial trauma and what does it mean to have race-based stress, I was looking at many different scales, many different studies, and came across Dr. Joy DeGruy and her book, and was very, very grateful that someone had taken the time to really connect the dots from our history of our ancestors to where we are today, and connect that to cellular memory, and also connect that to how we talk about generational trauma, and how we talk about generational curses, and how we talk about our present experience when navigating society as a community who has come up out of slavery. Right. And so her writings and her teachings and her speaking engagements, that I've heard her speak live as well, were very insightful because it gave me tools, language, to be able to connect the dots for the people around me who still had not yet dug deep enough to understand the relationship across history that we hold in the way that we still carry and present.
Right. I mean, you talk about the trauma of, inflicted with enslavement, but then there's the continued trauma with Jim Crow and what was taking place and throughout that era, turn of the 20th century, and lynchings and black bodies. My father, grew up in Mississippi, and so he saw lynchings in Mississippi. That's my father. So it's not far removed of this trauma that's taking place. Right. And then even of recently, whether it is those of us that witnessed the killing of George Floyd, Ahmaud Arbery, and all this that, that's been circulated through the social media, it leaves an effect on us. Yes. And so it's been continuous. Yes. It's not just about slavery.
No, not
it's been
at all.
Continuous.
It's been continuous, and it's been compounded, right? And so, if we again go back to the imagery of someone who's gone through another different type of trauma, who might be able to relate to a different type of trauma. If we talk about someone going through something as extensive as Hurricane Katrina. But imagine going through it over and over and over and over again over the course of hundreds of years.
Right.
And then what gets passed down, not only through the cellular memory, through genetics and through DNA, but also in what you're taught, what you are hearing expressed around you, the direct and indirect messages that you receive that shape your perception. How then would you perceive a storm when you see a storm coming? How then would you perceive your living arrangements and your living experience? And would you be able to live comfortably, or would you always feel like you need to be packed up and ready to go at the drop of a dime?
You're triggered.
Right? And hypervigilant and all of the different pieces, right? And so when we take the experience of Black Americans very specifically, we're taking it from a place of the trauma of slavery to the trauma of the family members that have been enslaved, that is also compounded, to the trauma of what happens then when you are no longer in that situation, but now you're in Jim Crow, now you're in Reconstruction, now you're in all of these other pieces of history up until today. And now you're here in 2025 and you're still experiencing racism.
Yes.
And even so distinctly in 2025, experiencing racism and the shift that has happened in the desire to invest, to show up for, and to engage in racial justice, right? Which is significantly different today than it was in 2020 when we watched the lynchings happen of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and so many others, right? And so there's a compounding of that. And that's just society at large. That's not your individual experiences. That's not your interpersonal experiences at work or at school or in a neighborhood or at a grocery store or at the mall or in your day-to-day life. And so there are so many pieces that are building in trauma, and that's impacting the way that we react and we respond.
I know, and you talked about responding, so I definitely want to talk about the psychological and behavioral patterns. And I know that is a part of that research of looking at that trauma. And it made me think about, I remember, I'm an only child. So if something happened in the house, I can't blame a brother or a sister. It's me.
It's you.
It's me.
It's your
me.
fault.
Right.
Oh, Lord. Standing in the need of prayer.
Absolutely. And the thing about it is I remember having to do this. And now I look at it, being an adult. I remember being that child where I got in trouble and I had to go out and pick out a switch. I had to go out to pick the instrument that was going to later inflict pain upon me for what I have done. And
don't pick one too small either.
Absolutely. Or it's going to be even worse. So it's like I think about that in the psychological trauma of doing that, but where that comes from, and it stems back from that idea of a parent needs to discipline their child in that way. It was out of protection.
Yes.
But it still yet causes trauma.
I have this conversation often because folks say, all right, what do we do? Corporal punishment, no corporal punishment, gentle parenting. Where do we stand? How do we stand? What does this look like? And let's talk about this generational trauma. And my first question is often, have you ever read the Willie Lynch letter? The Willie Lynch letter, which some propagate that it's not real and that it was fictitious. Some propagate that it was a real written letter from one plantation owner to others to inform how to create a smooth running plantation and how to maintain sustainability over the course of several hundred years. Whether or not it was fictitious or whether it was truly written as a guide for plantation owners, it doesn't really matter, because what is in there is accurate to what has happened throughout history.
Right.
And in that letter, there are instructions of how to pit different folks against each other. Light skin versus dark skin, old versus young, men versus women, right? You know, curly hair versus straight, whatever, right? And in that, it also gives instructions of how to break the will of the human being. And it compares breaking the will of a human to breaking the will of a horse. Right. And so in that, it talks about the type of tactics that are used to destroy the family unit and to destroy the individual so that they will be obedient. Kill the mind, leave the body is the principle.
Kill the mind, leave the body.
Kill the mind, leave the body. The idea that the body is useful for workforce, that labor is necessary and we need the body functioning for labor, but we do not want you thinking too much.
Oh, like getting rid of the Department of Education so you can't think critically, and so that you can just be sheep that are led to slaughter because the mind has been taken, but the body is still there.
Well,
let the church say amen.
So in this principle, what they essentially suggested is to first break the black man in front of everyone.
Right. And
so buck breaking was a tactic where black men were sodomized in front of their entire families and children, and you know, counterparts, for the sake of everyone having fear.
But I think it is very, this must be said, this is the norm.
This was the norm.
This is not something that was just an outlier.
No.
This was the norm for enslaved families.
Yes, this was the norm. Another one was an instruction very specifically was to, you know, if there was a black man that was resistant, to tar and feather him, to light him on fire, to tie him to two different horses, light him on fire, and or 4 different horses, and have the horses pulling him in opposite directions. Which there was a lot of controversy about some different logos out there that have that type of imagery, but don't have the person's body in there. But I'm gonna leave that alone. That particular experience was designed to torture him to the point up until death, but don't kill him.
Right.
Because then we'll restore him, we'll let him recover, and then we'll put him back to work. But the point is that we want everybody in fear, that if they resist or rebel in any type of way, then they are going to get tortured or killed or lynched, right? And so the goal was to instill fear into the mothers. So then the mothers would break their children on their own.
Wow.
So that the mothers would do as much as they possibly could to discipline their children to be obedient to the slave master for the sake of protection and survival. And so if my child gets out of line and gets disciplined by the overseer in the field or by the slave master himself or herself, because we're going to talk about that too.
Yes.
Then they could kill my child. They could sell my child. They could harm my child to the point of amputation of limbs or blinding my child. They could do a lot to harm my child. So instead, let me break my child's will. Let me discipline my child. Let me make sure that they don't do it ever again. I'm giving you this whipping. I'm giving you this whooping. I'm not trying to beat you the way they would beat you, but I also don't want you to feel like it's okay to do it again. This is about life or death.
Right.
And so that was what happened then. Over the course of history, we have passed down this disciplinary practice to break the will of the child from doing something that is considered inappropriate or could be costly to the child or to the family, and do that intentionally, as intensely as needed or as possible without harming the child. And then, of course, you've got those who go beyond breaking the will and actually break skin or create, wounds or actually harm the child both psychologically and physically. And there's lots of different thoughts about whether or not you should do it or not, and how do we break this cycle and all the things and all the stuff. There's a lot of thoughts about the Bible and it's saying spare the rod, spoil the child, and talking about how admonition and training and rebuke and those different pieces of discipline come together, and how to do it in love and how to do it in a way that is correction rather than just punishment. At the same time, we have to acknowledge the historical impact on this practice and how it came to be what it is. And so take it from me, who got spanked all the time.
I know you were the model citizen. You were the model child. You didn't get in any trouble. Come on now.
Every day I got spanked, okay, for a long time, till I was about 8 years old, and I was like, I'm tired. They're not gonna keep they're not gonna keep doing this to me. I'm gonna behave myself and stay out of trouble. And I managed to escape any further spankings until I was 16, and that was when I got my last one.
Okay, all right. I can't. I have a good friend. I know that I wised up, but I have a good friend. He's my best friend. We've been friends since the second grade, and I think he was about 16, I believe. And I was spending the night over his house. I don't know what he had did. He had did something, but his mother, she's like a mother to me. She goes into his bedroom. She gently pulls the covers off.
Oh, no.
He is sleeping soundly.
Oh, no.
And then all of a sudden, pow! And I was like, man, I said, I'm not going to say his name on here, but he knows who he is if he watches this. And I was like, hey, brother, I don't want that smoke.
No.
But we laugh about it.
Yeah.
We laugh about it, but it is important to understand where that comes from.
Yes.
And to understand, how we manage that, especially as we move from that to being parents. I have 3 daughters. And so I understood that, I had a psychological thing in our house. We had a decorative paddle that went up on the wall. I probably only had to use it maybe once or twice. But it was just a reminder. It was a reminder. But although I was passing on what I had learned as a child, but also too, I understood that, hey, this isn't something that should be managed with just doing this, because you don't want to harm your child. You don't want to also have the psychological trauma that takes place.
Yes.
And then I also want to talk about what it does internally, how we view each other as well, because this also triggers internal racism, right?
Absolutely. And I think, this is the hard part of being able to stand in the convergence of what was and what is, right? And when we do that, and we look at culture and we look at history and look at society, when it comes to, spankings, whoopings, paddlings, however you want to call it, we also have to acknowledge that there were practices that existed in systems that continued this, right? So education systems use that form of discipline.
I went to a Catholic school at one point in time, and you go to the principal's office, and they had, and
not just black education systems.
No.
Across all education systems, that this was a practice of discipline that
Calvary
continued,
Temple.
right? We also have to acknowledge that there were churches. Churches that would wake patrons up through some form of hitting, like with the use of a particular type of pole, right? Listen, you learn a lot of things when you study a lot of things.
That was new to me. So
and that was not a black church thing. That was in other churches. And so when we start to look at systems incorporating these different disciplinary actions and practices, right, then we also understand it continuing throughout the community, both at home and in the neighborhood and et cetera, as a society's way of continuing disciplinary actions. And so there are layers of it that come from our particular history, and then there are layers of it that were adapted by the society at large that impacted the community and the community's view and experience and perspective of these types of behaviors. But when it comes to looking at how we view ourselves, we often never got the explanations, right? And so there's a difference between parents giving instruction and parents giving information.
Right.
And what we see often is that historically, parents were in situations where you just need to be willing to follow the instruction because this is survival, right? Survival requires you to follow the instruction. We do not have time to explain and answer questions and this and that. I guarantee you Harriet Tubman was not stopping to explain why I said everybody be quiet just now. When I said hush, I meant hush because there's someone out there that can hear us and they could kill us if they find us. And if they catch us, then not only could we be killed, but folks back at home could be killed for aiding us and abetting us and this and this and this. I don't have time to explain that. If danger is lurking, I don't have time to explain that.
Right.
You just need to be trained to listen to instruction and follow. What has happened throughout our history is that has been passed down, where there's an expectation for you to obey the instruction without a lot of literacy to understand, why is it like this? What does this mean? What are the reasons behind it? To the effect of us not even knowing, because it's just been passed down to just do it. And so
because
we don't
I said so.
Because I said so.
Yeah,
and so we have internalized a lot of racism because the messages that we've received have been based in white supremacy. They have been based in colonization. They've been based in how society has viewed us and how society talks to us about us and how we talk to each other about us and how we talk to ourselves. And so it's a cycle that is influenced by systems, but then it's internalized. And then we, through our own thinking, our own social categorization, our own perceptions, our own biases, begin to implement the same thing in how we talk to one another, how we see one another, and how we treat one another. So then it comes out in implicit bias, right? Yep. The things that we're not necessarily aware of.
That's a banned word. You can't say implicit.
I'm sorry. Ooh.
No, we don't speak freely here.
It's that internal factor that leads you to make assumptions and generalizations about people. We call those stereotypes.
Right.
Or to treat folks in a particular way that leads to them understanding a negative message about themselves. Telling someone you need to straighten your hair to look professional, right?
Yeah, it looks unkept. That
right?
That part.
And so these things that manifest as microaggressions and then prejudice, these negative attitudes that we hold towards ourselves, towards other people, towards people within our same group, towards people that are in different groups, and this negative attitude that continues. Then there are the external factors, the explicit bias, the actions of ignoring and avoiding and sly remarks, slurs, violence, outright violence, verbal violence, physical violence, violence in all types of ways. And so when we look at this progression, then that becomes part of your practices. And then it becomes part of your processes and procedures. then it becomes part of your policies in your institutions. Then it becomes part of your systems in your larger systems like education and criminal justice system and government systems and economic systems, et cetera. And then it becomes, again, the thing that influences your own perception. So it's a cycle. And when we look at that cycle, our internalized racism has been developed because we don't have a literacy of these things. Right. And so if someone is telling me, which I experienced, you better be inside this house by the time the sun goes down. You better be on these steps before the sun goes down. Or
you better be home before the street lights come on.
Before the street lights come on.
And so what you're talking about is the explanation of why
exactly
you need. And I think those are the tools you're talking about as a parent. You have to go that extra step to explain why.
Exactly.
Because you understand the danger, but a child doesn't understand the danger. So part of that parenting, good parenting is to explain the why. You have to take the time.
You have to take the time. If your child doesn't understand that Ohio was full of sundown towns and counties where a black person would be lynched if caught in those areas after dark, if you don't explain that, then when you say it's dangerous outside at night, they do not understand what danger means. Dangerous outside at night to a child might mean that, you could get hit by a car more easily because they might not see you run out in the street. Right. Dangerous outside at night to a child might mean, well, is there a certain time frame in which the gangsters and the drug dealers and the prostitutes come out in the streets? They may not think about the implications of what danger really means. They might think, the night animals like the coyotes come out at night. And so they say come out because it's dangerous outside. They may not be attributing it to you could be targeted specifically, right? Because of who you are, because of what you look like. And so how serious do they take that warning may be determined by their understanding of what's happening. But either way, it just becomes a part of who you are and a part of your experience. Now, if there are other groups of people who were told to be coming in the house before the streetlights came on for other reasons that had nothing to do with their skin color.
Right.
But for us, it was about survival. It was about life or death. And so no wonder that switch got picked when you didn't come in at that time. And so this is what I mean by literacy. We have to take the time to explain things a little bit more to help people have a full understanding so they can make educated decisions, informed decisions. You tell a kid it's hot, don't touch it, they're going to reach for it anyway. But when you explain what being burnt means, what does a burn look like?
I have it right here on this hand.
Lord.
Touch the stove. Yep. And this is the thing that it does too. And while you were talking, I was thinking about this. It also protects the self-esteem of the child.
Yes.
When you take the extra step to explain to a person, and I say child, but this could be also a grown person, that you're speaking to. When you take that extra step to explain, you preserve their self-esteem.
Yes.
Because I think what happens is I'm being punished because of some other factor. It's something with me.
Yes.
It's something with me. And so that chips away at that self-esteem.
Absolutely.
When it is, no, this is because of these systems that you're talking about that we're trying to protect you from, and that's why it's important for us to do the work to protect our community, but also do the work of changing the systems at the same time.
Absolutely. It's like, one of the instances that Dr. DeGroot talks about in her book is how we treat our young men, right? We will, and not just our young men, our men in general, we will denigrate them and say horrible things about them and their behavior. We will do something.
That boy is bad.
Cut them down just a little bit. Because back then, if someone thought that my husband or son is good or accomplished or good looking or strong or has a good work ethic, then that means that he is expensive and valuable to the hands of the slave owner, which means I might make some real good money if I send him away. I might make some real good money if I breed him.
Right.
I might make some real good money if I allow him to be sexually exploited. So for a woman, Lord forbid that you take my baby and you do anything to him. So I have to make him look worse than what he is to survive. So, oh yeah, he's a hard worker, but he don't listen to instructions well. He doesn't take to instructions well. He's just a little goofy, a little airhead. He's a little all over the place. I'm going to make an excuse to keep you from thinking too highly of him. And that's now become so embedded that we don't even realize that we're doing it. Meanwhile, the person on the other end of that is experiencing, like you said, being chipped away at.
Right.
Being torn down by the people that he loved. The last time that you celebrate, most black men are celebrated is when they're in their formative years. When they are still in K through 12 is usually the last time that people celebrate them just as people.
I'll take a step further. Celebrate them beyond their physical attributes.
Come on.
And that's what I often contend with when I served as a mentor for the Play It Smart program for several years. It was through the National Football Foundation. And what I found is that beyond those informative years, boys, they start to invest in their physicality as their value.
Yes.
And not necessarily their minds or even their spirit, I would say. And I think we still contend this to this very day. And I think it's going to be even more further impactful when we see how difficult now it is to go on to go to higher education, when those opportunities are being abridged in many ways, when HBCUs are being attacked and so forth. We're going to have this issue where the only way I can get out is what I do on a basketball court, what I do on a football field, which is
already a belief.
Right. And so we must be mindful. We must be mindful of that legacy when it comes to our young men, but also too as well as our young daughters as well. Because there's also I remember I cannot think of her name. She's out of Atlanta. She wrote a book about education and about thriving, and she talks about how girls are sexualized at a younger age versus other, because, she might be developed and whatnot. And so that also plays on, it's almost the reverse of how her physical attributes then takes on her being and her existence and her value.
Absolutely. There's a fetishizing of black men and there's an adultification of black girls. And they are looked at, and boys, but usually the adultification of black boys is often related to their ability to engage in criminal behavior a lot earlier, or to be seen as men and to be seen as aggressive and those types of things. Whereas girls are oftentimes looked at sexually and looked at as, available, promiscuous, and many other things just for existing in their bodies. Right. Just for existing in their bodies. We're not talking about all of the overly sexualized music and movies and clothing and dressing. We're not talking even about those pieces added on. We're just talking about their bodies as they are presented, which they can't help which are impacted by all these hormones and the foods and the things that are easily accessible and available, and the food apartheid that's happening play a big role in all of that. Right. So it's still system based, even those pieces. But what we're seeing is that Black girls are sexualized. I remember being 13 years old and having men in their 40s approaching me at 13 years old. And I thought it was the strangest thing that could possibly happen, because what could you possibly want with me as a 13-year-old?
But let's be clear. That goes on in other communities.
It does.
When you talk about these Epstein files, and that's a problem. But it's either further impacted when you add on all the other things, when race plays a component as well.
Absolutely, and then it gives this complex where girls are met with this expectation that they have to be sexualized, that they should be sexualized, that sexuality and sexualization is equivalent to freedom and liberty, that their bodies can get them far in life if they choose to use them according to the way that society tells them that they should, that dressing a certain way can get them into things and get them out of things. And it's exacerbated by our media and our entertainment.
Right. Exactly.
And so back then, in enslavement times, it was once a girl reaches the age of womanhood, she can reproduce and we will breed her. And so the sexualization then was, who's going to make great babies that can work for us?
Right.
Who can we be able to utilize as a vehicle to manufacture our labor? This is our first labor plant. Is in Black bodies.
Say that one more time.
This is our first labor plant.
Wow.
It's a manufacturing plant, these Black bodies. And that is the way in which we were seen and used and violated and treated. And then there was a discarding of us because you are content with sexual experiences with us, but we have no value further than that.
Right.
And so that sexual violence was so pervasive throughout that time and after, and continues. And continues. And
that makes me think about, when I look at the landscape, when you have someone like Jasmine Crockett, and you have these outstanding, brilliant, elected officials who happen to be Black women, and how they are so accomplished, but yet, there's this their intelligence is there's an attempt to diminish their intellect, and by people who are not even as scholarly or as well read or as accomplished academically as they are. And so it continues. It
continues. I mean, I have certainly experienced a lot of that, especially as being the youngest Black woman tenured in the history of the country. Because as a young professor, I became a professor at the age of 20. And so there were...
And you have your own day too, December 1st, right?
My own day. December 1st is Taylor Curtis Day.
That's what's up.
Go fight the power on December 1st. That experience, there were so many times where I was told that I did not qualify, should not qualify, that I'm incompetent, where my dialect has been challenged and corrected.
Because you don't speak the King's English properly?
They don't speak the King's English
No,
properly.
they don't. And sometimes are awarded. They just speak so down to earth. And
if one was to talk properly, they would speak with a British accent, yeah? And they would call the bathroom the loo, okay? They don't speak British English. American Standard English is not even an official language of this country. We don't have one. And yet, those who come from communities that speak other dialects, whether it's a Southern dialect, a rural dialect, whether it's a mountain dialect, whether it's a dialect like African American Vernacular English, aka Black English, aka y'all tried to call it Ebonics back in the day. If we don't speak American Standard English, it's looked at as unprofessional. And I had to educate a colleague who tried to correct me in front of the dean in a meeting, who tried to correct me a couple of times. And after like the second or third attempt to correct me, I had to position myself towards her and tell her, I speak a different dialect. And then continue with my conversation and let the dean know that I will provide you all with resources to give you more information if you want to research dialects in English and understand a little bit more about the validity and the support that's needed to allow people to speak the dialect that they speak.
I got to stop you right there and ask this question. What gave you the audacity at that young of age to stand up and for yourself in that environment? Because there's a thing is, I want to get to this point, we deal with the trauma, but dealing with the healing part of it and how to own your own identity, to own your own self, to break that trauma. But that's an example right there. So my question to you is, where in the world did that come from you at that age to have the audacity to understand, yes, this is a dialect, and let me explain?
You know, for me, first and foremost, it is my spirituality that grounds me. It is truly my relationship with Jesus and understanding my identity as a child of God that allows me to really investigate how I'm supposed to show up in spaces. What is my character really made of? And what have I been designed and purposed to be? And when I realized that who that is was different than how I was showing up, because I had been used to minimizing myself to make other people comfortable. I had been used to...
You would dim your light.
Of course. I was used to being compliant to what society said, because that was a part of the journey that a lot of us have been on. And so when the rug was pulled out from under me, which in the theory of nigrescence, we talk about this journey to liberation that Black identity may go through. When the rug was pulled out from under me, I was very young. I was 5 when I first had my racist encounter where children in the room said, in the art class said, nobody talk to her, she's Black. I was 5. And the teacher did not stop them, did not correct them, did not do anything, and allowed them to continue on like that in the class. And I asked my mother to remove me from the class.
Now, I want to make this clear. You were 5 years old.
5 years old.
So I don't want to necessarily tell your age, but what year are we talking about? This is 19 what?
We were in 1997.
In 1997.
1997.
You were in a classroom.
In a classroom.
And you were, the students said, don't talk to her because she's Black. And the teacher heard it. It did not correct them, didn't say anything.
Correct. And so I asked my mother to remove me from the class. I don't even think I told her why. Because I knew that she would not be very pleased. And she would have some things to say.
Right.
And I didn't want her opportunities, reputation, et cetera, to be impacted in any kind of way. So that right there was when the rug was pulled out from under me, for me to realize I'm different, I'm going to be treated different. And I would comply with society for a long time until I got to this place of seeing so much death, so many lynchings, that I was like, something has to give, something has to change, right? I was seeing Trayvon Martin, a friend of mine, Kylan English.
I'm glad. I'm glad you, because people was like, well, hold on, lynchings.
Yes.
Those are lynchings.
These are lynchings.
It's a modern day.
These are modern day
Yes,
lynchings
yes, absolutely.
that technically were just federally outlawed a couple of years ago, in the 2020s. Okay. And so those types of moments really were reckoning for me to say, if I'm claiming this identity as a child of God and I'm saying that I'm walking in these principles, then how do I actually do that in my daily life in action? Because the way that I've been going has been the way that the broad road has led, where everyone else is going. How do I go against this grain? What does that look like? And so it took me doing a lot of research to understand these things for myself. Well, wait a minute. Let's unpack the messages that I received. Let's unpack what I've been told about my people, what I've been told about myself. Let's unpack the advice that's been given to me from elders about how to make it through. And when I came to become a professor, the elders that worked around me would tell me, keep your head down, be quiet, don't stir up too much, don't make a lot of noise, get your work done and get out. And that's how you navigate academia. And I was like, that sounds crazy and boring. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. Then I was told, if your department doesn't like you, which they didn't, if your department doesn't like you, then do things on a college-wide basis. Do things with collaborative groups and committees and things like that. It allows you to keep your head down a little more. And I was like, okay. And they would just keep telling me these things of like, don't stir the pot, don't stir the pot, don't stir the pot. And at some point, I was just, I had to come to a place of acknowledgement of this is not who I am nor who I was created to be. I've always been vocal. I've always been aware of who I'm supposed to be, whether I was acting in it or not. I always was aware that there was more to life than just submitting to the flow of things.
Right.
And my God said I can live in abundance. So how do I get to that type of thinking instead of this deficit mindset that we don't have a lot and so don't mess up what we got? And so that deep diving spiritually, that deep diving into research, that deep diving into understanding myself psychologically and understanding the messages I've received, it woke me up. I had to realize, like, oh, they told me don't wear my big hoop earrings to any of my interviews, but to wear these dainty little ones. Why?
Right.
They told me don't come in with your blonde afro, come in with a straight slick back ponytail and minimize the appearance piece as much as possible. Why? And I realize now, if your hair was considered unkept back in enslavement days, and if you didn't keep good home and good appearance for you and your children, then you're not a good worker. You're not going to keep my house up very well. And then what jobs were available for women after enslavement? Domestics. And domestic jobs were all that was available for a long period of time because certain things were just not allotted to us. And so there's been this long-standing generational racial trauma that's been passed down to suggest that your appearance, your words, your dialect, your behavior, that these things are out of pocket, against the standard, and negative in some way.
It sounds like you went from a surviving mindset to a thriving mindset.
Absolutely.
And so it's with all the things we talked about, whether it's parenting, my wife and I, we talked about this, this when people are parenting through a survival mode versus parenting through a thriving mode. And so we're talking about navigating through life with a thriving mentality and not necessarily a survival mentality. And it sounds like you had that shift. It's like, well, so I'm going to dim my light and to dim my expression of how I am to appease and be complicit to how you see me, versus me deciding I'm going to show up the way that I genuinely feel I should show up. And so I'm going to have my hair the way that it's going to. I'm going to rock these fly glasses that I got on. I'm going to rock these big hoop earrings because I'm a part of this, whether I want to be Afrocentric, whatever you want to call it, that you're going to judge me for who I am and not that imposter that you want me to be.
Yeah, and also because who I am is supposed to be a billboard. I am supposed to be a letter read among men. I am supposed to be a letter of love read among men. I am supposed to be a light on a hill, not hidden under a lampshade. And so in order for me to do that, I either have to be it authentically, or people are going to catch the fact that it's not authentic and they're not going to subscribe, right? I have to be that authentically. And I have a responsibility to the generation after me to demonstrate that it can be done and to help break the cycle. We can't say that we want to break every chain and we want to be, this generation is the one that breaks the curse and the ancestors' wildest dreams and all these things that we say that we want to be, and not actually show up as that and be willing to disrupt what has been continuously flowing. You have to be willing to disrupt the status quo, or you are complicit to the problem. You're either part of the problem or you're part of the solution. You cannot be complicit to the problem and complain about the problem. You have to choose to do something differently. And so I had to make a choice to say, I am willing to stand without fear. And that's a big part of it, is that I had to come to the conclusion that I no longer wanted to live with the spirit of fear. I no longer want that thing to be my lifetime partner, and that I consult with fear before I make a decision. I consult with fear before I say something. I consult with fear before I decide how to move forward, because fear is telling me, if you do that, you'll lose your job. If you do that, they're not going to like you. If you do that, they're not going to hire you for this. If they do that, they're not going to promote you. I can't be in partnership with that. That is not my husband. I do not want to be in partnership with that at all. If I'm going to do this, I need to be in partnership with the light. So my partnership with God was like, all right, I'm consulting with you. And how I make my decisions will be based off of what I'm supposed to do according to what's spiritually right for me, not what's physically best or what is financially appealing, or what in the conversations that those elders were having was, keep your head down so you can keep a job. Some of us, we just trying to feed our families. It's that survival mode.
Right.
And so I realized I have to shift position, especially if I say that I want to see these things change. I can't keep it the same and change it at the same time. It doesn't work like that. Go to any house that needs a new foundation. You go to any house that needs a new foundation. And I heard a couple great folks talk about this at length. Isabel Wilkerson is one of them who I got to hear in person share some of this, and who was with her? Some great conversations that happened, and essentially, it was a conversation that we have to change the house. The foundation is not going to do it. The foundation is cracked. The foundation is broken. The foundation is destroyed. And so we cannot lean on this foundation and keep building upon this foundation. We have to build a new foundation. And you can't live in a house with a foundation that needs to be renewed and with a new foundation. You can't live there and build a new foundation at the same time. You've got to get out of the house. And it was Nicole Hannah Jones, Nikki
Oh,
Hannah
yeah.
Jones, who wrote the 1619 Project. Isabel Wilkerson, who wrote Caste and Origin, and has done a lot. The Warmth of Other Suns.
Oh, yes.
A lot of great work. And I listened to a conversation between the two of them. I sat in a room listening to them speak, and as they talked about this house and this foundation, I was just like, this is so pertinent to where we are today, because for healing to take place, you have to be willing to be removed from the house. And that is hard, because you have to forego everything that you thought you knew, everything that you thought you had a grasp on, what you thought things were going to look like, how you thought you were going to show up, and be willing to sacrifice what is for what could be. And that requires a level of peace. Peace is not the absence of the problems. Peace is how you navigate through. And if you do not have peace, but you have a partnership with fear, you will never remove yourself from that space.
The peace that exists doesn't mean that the storm is taking place. That just means that you are in the eye of the storm, because there's a tornado that's going on right in the center. It's like this calm and this peace.
And when the storm moves, you have to stay in the eye, which means you also have to move. You can't stay
there. You go
there. And that's what I mean by you got to come out the house. And we don't want to do that, because what's out there? It's
uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable, because if I strip myself of everything I've ever known, that means that I have to acknowledge, one, that everything I've ever known has been known through the filter of white supremacy. Which means that me thinking that I'm my own person is actually not true, because I'm actually the person that society created me to be. Which means that I'm essentially destabilizing what I thought was stable, because now I have to remove myself from this foundation that's been laying here this whole time. I thought it was stable, but it's not. And me removing myself means that I no longer feel like I'm at home anymore. I have to get uncomfortable. And I have to be willing to sacrifice. And that's the part no one wants to talk about.
I'm letting you know, this is really speaking to me, this conversation, talking about the storm, talking about, how to manage the trauma, generational, historical, and how it impacts from a personal level. Because what we're talking about, and I've often said this is, although we talk about history, I make things personal, and I want people to take the history personal. It is our story. And so when you make it personal, that way you're able to critically look at yourself and how you are moving in this world. And I think that's what you're talking about, challenging yourself.
Challenge yourself. Ask yourself the question about everything.
Right.
Where did my perspective or belief come from? What messages, direct and indirect, did I receive that led me to this thought? And then ask yourself, where does racism fit into that?
Well, I just want to sincerely thank you for taking the time, sharing your perspective. I mean, there's a lot. I'm quite sure there's going to people just going to stop and pause and write things down on this one. But I want to thank you for blessing us with your perspective. I want to encourage you to continue to do the work that you are doing to uplift not only yourself, but our communities, and to keep spreading this word so that we can continue to navigate through the storm and to move
Yes.
in the eye of the storm, right?
Yes, yes. Let's build a new house. Let's build a new foundation. And let's choose to be a part of the solution. And that starts with us.
Right on. Thank you so much. Uh-oh, jinx. Excluding the matter of race, the twists and turns of life are already challenging enough. The reality of racial trauma continues to stand at center stage with Black lives as the protagonists. Even in our attempts to reconcile and heal, the pale hand of racism keeps grasping for our throats, antagonizing us. The most essential part of dealing with a problem is recognizing that it exists. Racial hatred exists, and its effects are real, so we must be vigilant in illuminating the darkness through our brilliance. This is your scholar and gentleman in a hoodie. Know thy history.